And joining me today to comment these three major developments is General Ben Hodges, former commander of U.S. forces to Europe. A very warm welcome to you, General.
Thank you very much for the privilege.
Let me start with the meeting between Joe Biden and Donald Trump today. A very civil meeting, apparently. Smooth transition, as smooth as possible, as Donald Trump put it. And a transfer of power strikingly different than this one in 2020. But the National Security Advisor, Jack Sullivan, said that Joe Biden laid out a strong and stable Europe is vital for our country to ensure we are not dragged in a dangerous game. This is his words. Do you think that Donald Trump could alter, possibly, his geopolitical perception when entering the office in January?
Well, first, let me say congratulations to President Biden for having the dignity and the class to invite former President Trump into the White House to continue this tradition, which was interrupted 4 years ago. So I think this says something about President Biden and his respect for the important tradition of a smooth transition of power. This is important, and I hope it sets an example for others as well. Now, President-elect Trump, of course, has the prerogative, will have the prerogative as president to set priorities and direction. He's starting to build his team around him, and we're getting some indicators of what that direction will be based on the people he's putting into place. But of course, the Congress has a role also, and the Republican leadership in the Senate and in the House, by and large, are pro-NATO, pro-transatlantic, pro-Ukraine. And so I think we should, if the system works like it should, the Congress will play a role in helping to guide foreign policy as well.
Exactly. We keep on asking about this change in the White House. Understandably, nothing can be said for certain about the course of the foreign policy of the new administration, yet the threats remain the same and have not weakened. So what do you expect to happen with the new Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and Donald Trump taking the lead?
Well, you know, the election was only a week ago. It seems like several weeks ago, but it actually was only 1 week ago. And as you and most of your viewers know, foreign policy seldom plays a critical role in U.S. Presidential elections. But then what always happens is that after the election and the presidents are in place, foreign policy typically moves to the front of their priority list. So I think we're going to find out very quickly what a Trump administration foreign policy will look like, and how Senator Rubio, assuming he is confirmed as the Secretary of State and the team that he builds around him, we're going to find out. I think it's clear that a Trump administration will be looking to our European allies to live up to their obligations. Obviously, that's not a problem in Poland. Poland has always been in the front of countries doing everything that they possibly can and should for their own security as well as collective security. But I think the Trump administration will look to the rest of Europe to follow Poland's lead. There's no doubt about that, and I think that's fair. I imagine that the Trump administration will look for ways to deter China from its aggressive activities. And of course, the United States needs allies, economic and diplomatic, as well as military allies, to have an effective policy with regards to China.
Well, geopolitically, the most important event, the biggest news here from our regional perspective, is the opening of the first air defense base in Redzikowo, northern Poland. So we welcomed it today. How important is this naval support facility, as it's called, for the defense of the eastern flank?
Yeah, this is extremely important. It's been a long time coming. As you know, the construction on this missile defense system began many years ago, and I'm glad to see that we're finally at a point where it is soon to be operational. my concern after watching Russian use of missiles and glide bombs and drones against Ukrainian civilians and Ukrainian infrastructure over the past 2.5 years was that we did not have enough air and missile defense capability in all of Europe. So this is an important contribution to that. Of course, by itself, it's not enough, but it is an important contribution. And I think improving air and missile defense across the alliance is going to be a critical part of deterring Russia from making terrible miscalculations.
Right, miscalculation, well put. Where in Eastern Europe is the Russian threat most visible? And how much military capabilities does actually Russia dispose of near our borders here in the Baltic region?
Well, that's an interesting way to frame the question. The Russian threat permeates most every country in Europe through the use of disinformation, the criminal activity, the attacks on our infrastructure, both with cyber as well as kinetic means. So the Russians, their spoofing of GPS, all of these things are really very dangerous. And I think that the Russians have a mental attitude of they are at war with us, even if we don't think that we are at war with them. And so they continue to push airspace violations and so on. So if we, the West, allow Ukraine to fail, then you're going to see millions of Ukrainian refugees, additional Ukrainian refugees, coming into Poland and Germany. You're going to see continued disruption of grain and energy shipments from the region, which will continue to affect our economies. And so this threat is not just in one place. It's not just a land threat. It's not just an air threat. It's the full spectrum of types of threats, which is why the alliance needs continued American participation and leadership, but also each country doing its own part, not just with good modern forces, but also strong, resilient societies where our infrastructure is protected and the people are able to withstand disinformation. This is all part of resisting Russian aggression.
What is your opinion about the state of negotiation, or maybe of the state of thinking, the Western way of thinking about the ongoing war? There are recurring calls for Moscow-Kiev peace talks, for instance, and some talk even of a possibility of going back to the draft deal from Istanbul, which obviously was never agreed. So what do you think about that? Are we allowing ourselves to lose and allowing Ukraine to lose slowly?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent way to put it. After almost 11 years, with Russia having every advantage, they still only control about 20% of Ukraine. They're losing thousands of soldiers every week. Their Air Force, the Russian Air Force, has failed its two main tasks of achieving air superiority and cutting the resupply lines from Poland into Ukraine. The Black Sea Fleet has been defeated in the Western Black Sea. Russia's defense industry is in deep trouble. And we haven't even tried. I mean, we haven't actually provided everything that Ukraine needs to win. We haven't used all of our economic tools. Imagine if we stopped Russia from exporting oil and gas through the Baltic Sea and the Black Sea to India and China, how much trouble they would be in. So I think calls to negotiate are premature. If we were thinking strategically, we would recognize that Ukraine actually defeating Russia is the best possible outcome for all of Europe and the United States. It would also isolate Iran, which would take pressure off of Israel, and it would send a powerful message of deterrence to China that the West does have the political will and the industrial capacity and the military capability to help Ukraine defeat Russia. So when I hear people talk about Ukraine fatigue, nobody should be tired except the Ukrainians. And any settlement that allows Russia to keep what they have taken illegally and with their aggression sends a terrible message about a weak lack of will on the part of the West. And there's zero evidence that Russia has lived up to any treaty or agreement it's ever made unless it was forced to. And that's why I'm very skeptical about any kind of negotiations with this as a start point.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sharing your comments with us, General. Thank you for watching. This was